Hi, I'm Jeff Sikkenga, Executive Director of the Ashbrook Center, and this is The American Idea, where we discuss the ideas, people, and events that have made America what it is today. We believe that by understanding our history and our principles, we can better live up to the promise of the American founding and preserve our ongoing experiment in self-government. Welcome to The American Idea.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of The American Idea. Today, we are welcoming a special guest, someone who might be a little bit unusual on this podcast, but I think once we start talking with him, you're going to find out not so much. We're welcoming today for a conversation about jazz, David Parker. David is an entrepreneur. He is an educator, a public school teacher of music for 40 years, successful real estate investor, a writer, a columnist and commentator, and also, and maybe most important for this episode of The American Idea, a very accomplished musician, including a jazz musician. I want to talk today about jazz as America's classical music. David Parker, thanks for taking the time to join us today on The American Idea.
Glad to be here.
Your career in jazz, I have heard it described as America's classical music. Maybe I could just start with this. How is jazz classical and how is it American? Because I could just say for my own self, and I'm not a jazz connoisseur, I need to learn a lot more. But you hear people will say there's classical music over here and there's rock and roll over here. The twain do not meet and they don't know where jazz fits in.
So that's completely wrong.
Okay.
You Gallison said it best. Music is either good or it's not. And if it's good, it's any music. Rock, jazz, Balinese, tambang, African music. If it's good, all musicians hear it right away. Paul McCartney and Harrison and John Lennon, their music will be heard 200 years from now.
Wow.
That's how good everything is. That's composition. They've captured what is good in music. So in that sense, it's classical. The best rock and roll is classical. And the best classical is to play spontaneously. It's rock and roll. Because you're listening, you're the oboe player and you're listening to what the bassoon players just play 5 seconds before you.
Right.
And you better match that. Or else that means you're not listening. The audience knows you're not listening and you're not part of the piece. You're just playing a note to get paid. And that's the key to jazz is listening.
Listening.
Miles Davis has a famous book, his autobiography, and the first word in 20 or 30 or 40 point cap is listen. Listen. Huge black letters, period. And when I first bought that book, I read that book and closed it. Actually, that's what it's all about. I'm not going to go back until I've improved my listening.
Wow. Now that's interesting because I think a lot of our listeners on The American Idea who are not musicians and certainly not jazz musicians would say, no, the thing about jazz music is playing, not listening. Why is it listening? Why is listening so important for jazz?
If you're playing music that's mindless, maybe to a hotel lobby, well, you're playing for the elevator festival of jazz. But otherwise, it's serious music. It's serious music. It's composition, and the good players know what they're doing, and they're very well trained. Most of them are trained classically intact. It is completely irrefutable. You can call jazz American in that it evolves in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And it could not have evolved had European music not met African music.
Interesting. Tell me about that coming together of the European music and the African music.
Well, anybody who came from Africa, anywhere, Latin, South America, North America, and they all heard European music.
Mm-hmm.
And they all had, especially rhythm training, the background.
Mm-hmm.
And then they developed, even developed their form of music, a compositional form called the blues.
Right. Okay.
It didn't exist. It was 12 bars, and it makes very good sense. And so you take European melody and harmony and African rhythm, and then you take pretty soon the melody begins to sound like the rhythm. And pretty soon, melodic passages that sound kind of African. But it's, and harmonies are still European, and today they're even more and more modern. It's a genuine American art form.
Yeah, because it really does. It's now it's played, of course, all around the world, and there are international jazz festivals everywhere. But I really do think of it as starting in America.
Yeah.
Because of that, as you're saying, interestingly, because of that combination in America of African and European together in the same place, connecting with each other.
Right. Had there been no one from Africa ever came, which is a new world, jazz might not have ever evolved. It needed both.
It needed both. Tell me about a little bit more about musicians listening to each other. Because one of the things that seems hardest to me as a non-jazz player and a casual listener is the fact that jazz seems simultaneously very structured. There's a coherence to it, but there's improvisation going on all the time. So that it's this amazing combination of those two things that requires people to really be in sync with each other, in connection with each other. The players have to almost anticipate what the others are doing. How does that happen in playing jazz?
But they almost asked, how does that happen in classical music? A great classical, that's a great way to listen to classical music. The violinist played this. The trumpets followed as he played that. Oh, that came right out of that. It developed. And it's written down, and they're playing it kind of the same each time. And in jazz, they're playing what would be appropriate, but their own music. But to learn to improvise well takes practice, so you're working on my band. When we play, very often I'll play the same cues the next week.
Okay.
Because they had a chance to think about what they did on their solos and how we played that. They played the same tune a little slower, or a little bit different, and yet it'll change their solos, and they'll have caught how they would have played this solo better, and they'll play a solo again. So you're constantly listening. The really modern jazz is a word called harmonics. Ornette Coleman.
Okay.
He says, you have to listen. But all musicians can be playing all at the same time, in fact. And they don't have to be necessarily playing the same key. As long as we continue playing, this works with what's going on. And they don't have to be exactly on the same beat, as long as they're not too far away from where the beat is. And the melody has to be what it is. So harmonics, the harmony is whatever the jazz musician's melody was at that moment in time. Uncontrolled, write those down. That's the chord. That's not even the chord. That's 20 in 15 notes in there. Right. So they may be all side by side. They maybe just so they know, but that's the harmony. So you're listening with they can play different volumes. Yeah, you don't have to play the same, but it just has to be close enough that you can hear each other.
Right.
The other element of listening is I'm playing with some of the best musicians in town. In fact, they're one notch and a little better than I am. But so if I come on I have to practice crazy to stay up with that group. And I come rarely to reach a gig. I didn't practice the day before or something like that. In 10 seconds, 6 heads will turn in our practice. 6 seconds in our practice.
Because they're listening that close.
Yeah, you were a 64 degree off on on that beat, which should have been anticipated by a 64. So that's how sensitive it is.
Right. Jazz. I think of it, I connect it, of course, to America and the American experience, as you say, the coming together in this amazing, interesting way of the European and the African. I connect it also to a place. Of course, here we're in San Francisco, and you're playing in San Francisco. I, and maybe a lot of Americans, connect jazz to New Orleans. Tell me if there's anything that we should know about the historical connection of jazz to a place like New Orleans.
Everything starts somewhere. German music started in Germany.
Right.
And I went up Mississippi and developed the sound in Chicago. The Chicago blues is still being played. It's the center of American blues. And Mississippi Delta has blues. That's still a center. And New Orleans, I went to the New Orleans Jazz Festival, and the best group for the New Orleans groups. Second line bands, but all art, painting in the 19th century was romantic or classical. And then all of a sudden Monet came along,
right,
and boom, painted the sun in the ocean of the harbor. Beginning of Impressionism. There's nothing related to what happened before. And music, classical and jazz has had some violent shocks that were a logical extension once you think about it, but not took a creative person to pull it out. So today, the kind of jazz I like, and where jazz is going in one direction, is merging with contemporary classical. Well, that's a contemporary classical. I listen to Boulez and Carter and Stockhausen and Schoenberg, and I get inspired from my jazz. And what do you hear, if you don't mind, what do you hear in those contemporary classical composers that you can bring over into jazz? That music is called through composers. It's not, now here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end. It evolves and evolves and evolves and evolves. And to hold the listener's attention, better be doing. Because constantly, new ideas, how many new ideas does anybody have? Yes, right. So it's really difficult. But you hear, they're doing this. Oh, or was there? I'll never record of that. And you go amazed at where it's going.
Yeah.
So when I'm listening to, part of my practice is not just playing from stills. Every day I'll work on a piece. This week I'm in the key of C flat. I play everything I'm playing in the key of C flat. Very good for your ears to play pieces. Keys in and out written in and then when you stumble on a spot, because you played it in the wrong key, that was a key moment there. And it's why I stumbled to that might be the whole part of the piece because it's organized right. So playing different keys. Also, when you're listening to somebody do, so part of my practice is to improvise, play the tune, play the key of C flat like this way, and then be sure to improvise every day. Don't leave that out. It's not just playing the warm-ups.
Okay.
Fine. It's not practical unless you improvise.
Before we continue with our conversation, I think it's important to take a moment and tell you about our undergraduate honors program in the liberal arts here at Ashland University.
Hi, I'm Rich Police, Associate Director of Student Programs at the Ashbrook Center. The Ashbrook Scholar Program is an honors program located at Ashland University for undergraduate students with an interest in politics, history, and economics. Modeled after a classical liberal education, you will read the great texts, not textbooks. Your classes will be conversations, not lectures. Conversations with other students, with your professors, and with great thinkers and statesmen from throughout human history. If you or a young person you know are passionate about life's important questions, if you want an education that emphasizes discovery, if you value liberal education and the principles of freedom it upholds, then this is the place for you. To learn more, visit us online at ashbrookscholar.org.
All right, so that's interesting. This you mentioned, and then I guess it connects to this idea of improvisation. You mentioned there were some certain creative geniuses in jazz that sort of shocked jazz into a new thing or took it a new direction. Maybe that direction was already there latent form, but if they took it that direction. For our listeners' sake, who are some, in your mind, some of the most important jazz musicians who have really made that kind of contribution to jazz?
I'm probably not connecting the older composers correctly, but more modern jazz stuff, the shock would have been with, it's called bebop, with Charlie Parker.
Okay. Yeah.
In a way that no one had heard before. And then taking that one step further is Ornette Coleman, also playing on the alto.
Okay. Both alto saxophone players.
Those alto sax playing lines that people hadn't heard. They said, this is not music. And then today, it's easy listening. It's like impressionism and painting in 1890 or whatever. Sorry, dude, that's not art. We play easy viewing. That's to show that gets a lot of money.
Right.
But it's in time, this isn't art.
So Charlie Parker has that kind of original genius.
Original genius, correct.
Yeah. Are there others in contemporary times? If our listeners again are thinking, I want to listen to some of this interesting jazz that David's talking about, who's David Parker listening to?
Well, Ornette Coleman, for example, contributed, and he also wrote some classical. Lenza Simpson, Philharmonic played one of his classical pieces.
Interesting.
With included a jazz quartet or with a group. He brought me forward. Composer we play is Eric Dolphy, is a known jazz musician, playing with Charles Mingus. And he's written me some new music. An album I believe is called Out to Lunch. And one of the pieces we've never played tonight is Out There. It's really a Tolo, which comes from Schubert. It was his big music was the big break. He said you have to play 12 notes, all 12 notes of the scale. C, C sharp, D sharp. There's 12 of them before you go on. That was why the religion. And Herr Golfer said, well, you don't have to play all 12 for jazz. That's so I did too confusing. So I put one of his pieces. It's got six or seven notes. And then you do what Schubert did. You play it forward, and then you can play it backwards. That's also part of the method. And then if you take the intervals and reverse them, like if you work in C to F, you can go you C to F down, which is a fifth, as opposed to C to F was a fourth. So you play the whole roll, but with the intervals inverted, you then play that backwards. The guys at the end, that's what I did.
Yeah, draws up. That sounds complex.
So that's one way to hold it as. That's a contribution to jazz. Eric Dolphy, one of the field composers who ever would take that Schubert tone roll and make it sound like jazz. Coltrane was asked to do that. He says, I would, but I can't make it sound like jazz. I can't do it. I don't do it, but I appreciate it. I know what it is, and I can't do it. Dolphy could really do it.
Right. Maybe this is an unfair question, but I was struck by your phrase, make it sound like jazz. To you, what does jazz sound like?
Oh, well, I should say make it sound like the music that's being played at the moment.
Yeah.
But a person told me once, a musician, if it's sometime, because jazz is getting more and more modern, or something jazz is getting very modern, and then if it never gets into a groove, it's not jazz. It's modern music.
Okay.
It didn't get into a groove. This swing, you can say, for at least for part of it.
Okay.
In and out of swinging, it's not jazz. It's modern music.
It needs to keep connected to the African rhythm root.
I suppose the rhythm is all people, but jazz.
Yes. Well, the particular one. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So swing or African rhythms, when you snap, you're snapping in 2 and 4. And most Lawrence Welk would snap on 1. A new part of the country would line.
Yes, that's right.
The 3, 4, and the jazz musicians would never do that. Them go 1, 2, 3, 4. So part of that's the swing.
You're a bass player.
Yeah.
In jazz. Do you have a favorite bass player?
Yeah. Charles Mingus.
Charles Mingus. Yeah, tell us and our listeners who might not know a lot about jazz, who was Charles Mingus and why is he so important?
But his sound, it was something haunting. And sometimes it was African. But he's a trained classical bass player, and perhaps even a cello player. And he's a genuine composer who's written like 100 tunes. And all of them are like classics, even jazz. They're great pieces of music. And he didn't always play a lot of notes. And he would have rehearsals. He said, I got an idea. We called the band on a little sheet of paper and for the label. Here it is. We got it. He said, don't look at it anywhere out now. Just listen and play it. Yeah, his pieces are perfect. The way he plays and and in his soulfulness, it was my soulful. I consider myself to be a soulful player, and all the band people I have in my band are soulful players.
Yeah.
I mean, really soulful players.
Yeah, right.
What's your? And again,
This is I was a saxophone player in high school. That's as far as I made it in playing an instrument that's closest to jazz. But a great jazz group. What are the instruments that are involved in it? And what's the connection between the players? Can you talk a little bit more about the instruments themselves?
Jazz, like from the days of Pete Ellington and Count Basie, they were practically orchestras, right? 5 trombones and 5 saxes and 5 trumpets and several percussion and piano and maybe a singer. And all of a sudden, in the late 40s, or in the 40s, where someone said, let's just take 3 or 4 or 5 musicians and trying to do the same thing.
Right.
And those guys, they were out of money. Duke Ellington made a lot of money in his lifetime, and he died poor because he kept his band going in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, when big bands were not popular. He took all his money and gave it back to the band, being in careers in retirement. It says it's last time gave it all back, like Andrew Carnegie gave it all back.
Right.
Then gave it all back.
Right.
So, but that style has changed to small combination. And every once in a while, people want a bigger band. The Cuban music often has larger bands. They'll have 3 or 4 trumpets playing at the same time, and 4 or 5 percussion playing. And so that anything good always comes back. So it's can be traditional jazz instruments because they can be non-traditional jazz instruments. It's what you say with your instrument that counts. It's not what the instrument is.
Well, so sometimes jazz, of course, does not have a vocalist. Sometimes jazz, of course, had vocalists. Jazz vocalists, again, for our listeners, if they're thinking, I want to hear somebody who really knows how to sing jazz beautifully, whether that's today or whether that's just someone in the history of jazz, who should they be listening?
That's a good question. There's not very many. Just this song words. The only person who just sang the words and didn't improvise was Billie Holiday. But her sense of rhythm was so exquisite that you can tremble when you heard her play, that she was not improvising. And jazz musicians generally don't like singers to come on. It ruins it. Ruins it. Because they're not improvising, and they're not playing like one of the band. They have the little egos, and they're the star, and they're not listening. They're just singing, "You follow me, I'm the leader." But Ella Fitzgerald got the band's appreciation. She came on one day, a set, the band gave her a hard time, and the trombone player played something. She went up to him and give it right back to him. Yeah. He gave her a low one. He gave her right back. The band says, "Okay, she can play." She was one of us.
She had the instrument.
She had the instrument. She can play like the band member. That's what people can do that.
Right. In your writing, I was struck by this phrase that you used talking about your own experience playing jazz and being part of the band. You said you talk about finding joy and wisdom in jazz.
Well, it's a function of your attitude when you're playing. I'm going there for spiritual moments. Really there for a spiritual moment. And that's how I play. Even was as fast or slower. And next thing, Charles Mingus, he inspired me that way. This sound has that to it. The joy, as I'm playing, we're all locking in. 6 people locking in at the same time. That's what you call it. And in wisdom, I'm not sure, but if you're improvising and intuiting purely, it takes experience and wisdom to do that. Right?
And insight. You have an insight. Yeah.
But my insight is my wisdom in that sense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have used that word today, but
that's fascinating. When I think of jazz, let me just throw a name and tell me what you think. I often see him and I associate him, certainly on the trumpet, with jazz, Louis Armstrong, a great American who had important and interesting things to say about our country, but I think was important in jazz.
Perhaps he's the greatest jazz musician of all time.
Wow.
In my opinion.
Wow.
To me, I associate Louis Armstrong with Rembrandt. You could look at a Rembrandt from 1600s, something like that. I went to an art institute, and Rembrandt and his students. And Rembrandt student, Rembrandt student. Picked up right away. And everything in art is in Rembrandt. Anything today, any modern notion is in Rembrandt. A masterpiece in any art form is beyond the artist or the composer himself. He's actually a vehicle for something that's greater. Like a child protege, 6 years old, plays like an adult. He's not an adult. He's not an adult. He's a vehicle. He can do it. And so Rembrandt would do stuff that everything in art is in Rembrandt. And everything in modern music, and for modern jazz, is in Louis Armstrong. I get shivers out of this to Louis Armstrong. That's how it's beyond him.
Yeah.
He could never explain how he's doing that.
Incredible. On American Idea, maybe your answer will be a jazz musician. If it is, that's fine. But we always like to ask all of our guests, because it's Ashbrook, we value, as you know, so deeply American history and American principles. Who's your favorite person in American history?
In American history?
In American history. Maybe we could start with American jazz and then talk about American history.
Well, jazz is a young art form, relatively speaking, our world. And when Jefferson was young, he was my model. He was my inspiration. When he got older, he said things I didn't want. I wish he had said. When he was younger, he was great.
The young Thomas Jefferson.
Young Thomas Jefferson was everything an American should be. And we are a Jeffersonian democracy, which means that every person in this nation gets a vote, no matter what your wealth or social status is. Jefferson said, if you're afraid of that, you're afraid of having your neighbor vote, you're afraid of democracy. Me.
Right. Yeah, and Jefferson embraced, as jazz embraces improvisation and freedom, Jefferson embraced those and articulated those fundamental principles of freedom for this country.
Right. He's part of the age of enlightenment.
Yeah.
Social, political, economic freedom. Don't touch him.
Fascinating. What jazz, America's classical music, I think we have a much deeper understanding now, talking to you, David, how it's classical, how it's American, and how it all fits together. Thank you for taking the time to join us on American Idea.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The American Idea. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star review. If you want to learn more or get involved in Ashbrook's vital work, visit our website, ashbrook.org.